Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DeCerbo. Most fascinating podcast in the world. Has nothing to do with me. Anyone who's watched knows it has everything to do with the people who agree to allow me to interview them. And today, I have a very fascinating woman. Her name is Lenee Koch, and Lenee is in business development for Hensel Phelps, one of the most respected construction firms, construction management firms, design build firms, etc., in America, and with a focus on safety and collaborative execution of projects that, to my way of thinking, is legendary. I'm not saying there's no one else, but you are certainly one of very few at the very top with that kind of reputation. And I just wanted to welcome you today, Lenee, and thank you for agreeing to talk to me.
Thank you, Pat. It's a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So, as you know, I'm in the habit of asking people about their earliest memories. And I wondered, where did you grow up when you were a little kid? And what do you remember from when you were really young?
So I am a Colorado native, actually. So I grew up in Colorado and still live in Colorado. So there, less and less of us natives here as we get more and more people that are realizing how wonderful Colorado is with our 300 days of sunshine and beautiful weather. And even though it snows, it warms up pretty quickly, so the snow doesn't stick around too long. So I think people are figuring out our secret. But yeah, born and raised in
Especially
Colorado.
down in Denver, you mean?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, mountains, a little different story. Snow sticks around for our amazing skiing and resorts up there. But yeah, so I grew up in Colorado, but probably some of my earliest memories, my dad was born and raised in Durango, Mexico. And we would vacation to go visit family in Mexico, starting from when I was very, very young. And so a lot of my memories are recalling those drives to Mexico. We actually drove from Colorado to Durango because we didn't have a lot of money. And my mom was from Wheat Ridge, Colorado, which is also where I live now. And they met coincidentally at a Mexican restaurant. She was the hostess at 18 years old. When he immigrated here in his 20s, he became a cook, and they met and got married pretty quickly after that. And my mom was 19 when she had me, and so I'm the oldest in my family, and so we would travel to Mexico and drive. And I remember those drives along the way, 26, 27, 28 hours. And visiting family and, walking around in, Mexico, going to the tortilleria with my cousin who lived there and, getting, fresh tortillas, returning Coke bottles, that we had to return in order to get, new ones from recycling. So, yeah, lots of memories of going back to Mexico to visit family when I was younger.
That's really neat. And I feel like we spoke a little Spanish. How's your Spanish?
It's pretty good. I try to practice. Of course, you have to practice to keep it going. But my dad, Spanish was his first language, and my mom ended up learning just because she got tired of hearing people talk about her in a different language. So she actually self-taught herself, and then I learned a lot, younger, just because we were around family that only spoke Spanish, and then I, did it all through school. So I can hold my own.
Podemos hablar. Podemos hacer la entrevista totalmente en español si quieres.
No, eso va a estar más difícil para mí, pero sí entiendo. Y sí puedo platicar un poquito.
Ok, tenemos que practicar. La próxima vez. In other words, I said, we'll do the whole interview in
Perfecto.
Spanish. And she said, bad idea until I practice. So we're going to practice and do it in Spanish in a year. That's
Good thing.
funny that your dad became a cook before you became a cook.
That's funny. Yes, that's good. Well played. Well played. Yes. Mm.
So did you do sports growing up, or how did you say when you became an adolescent or middle school?
I did. So, starting at 7 years old, my parents started me in gymnastics. And that was basically my one and only sport because for people that know gymnastics, they know that it's a pretty big commitment, that you don't have a whole lot of time to spare and participate in other sports. So, I was going to gymnastics practice, 3, 4 times a week with competitions on weekends. And so I did that all through adolescence, high school, and ultimately in college. Actually, I got a awesome scholarship to the University of Denver here in Denver, Colorado, and it was a D1 gymnastics team at the time. You only had three D1 sports at the time when I was there. It was hockey, gymnastics, and skiing. And luckily, I was fortunate enough to get that scholarship and compete 4 years in D1 collegiate NCAA athletics as a gymnast.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah,
Not that I
so
know you
it's
well, but I didn't know
right.
that story.
Yeah, no, it was,
Um,
and a little fun fact that I tend to not share, but people have found out over the years. I was actually the first ever gymnast at DU to record a 10.0. And
oh
I
my
did
God.
it on the same night on two events. So
Wow. What two events were
cool.
they?
The bars, uneven bars, and floor. And it was my senior year, the last senior meet at home. And so, yeah, I was the first to ever record a 10. So the announcer kept saying, record only to be tied, never to be broken, because it was the first time ever anyone at DU had scored a 10. And since then, obviously, others have scored 10. So it's continued to evolve, but I will forever be the first one that received that score for the university. So super cool.
That's pretty cool. You must have gotten a standing ovation.
It was pretty cool. And I
Had
had my
to.
whole family there, and yeah, it was pretty awesome. Um, Definitely for years and years of hard work, because it's definitely a disciplined sport. And I think that honestly helped me just in all life endeavors. I mean, I think sports do in general, but gymnastics is very disciplined sport that you are, I know it's just a different level. You don't get many breaks. There's a season, obviously, of competition, but then in the off season, you're always working to improve your skills, learn new tricks, build new routines for the following year. And so you don't ever really take much time off because you also can really mess up your timing on things because your body can get out of whack, if you will, and it doesn't it's hard to come back and get back to where you are. So even in the off seasons and in the summer, we were practicing 4 or 5 days a week for a couple hours. And so I think just that discipline of getting up, committing, working hard has served me well in my adult life, with my family, with my children, and with my professional career. So I owe a lot to the sport and several of my coaches that were amazing mentors for me as I grew up.
I bet. I don't know much about the sport, but I've heard a couple great speeches. I heard this one speech by Peter Vidmar. Have you ever heard him
Hmm.
speak? God, he's
No.
good. He's
Okay.
really good. And you can get him on
Okay.
YouTube, but he talked about, I might get it wrong, but it was like compulsory difficulty and virtuosity. And he talked about
Hmm.
how you have these compulsory events you need to do, and you got to be
Right.
good on whatever, six or how many events are there? I forget.
Gymnastics is for women, and for men it's six.
Six for men. So you have to be good at every one of these six. And he
Hmm.
said, you just have to get the compulsory items in every routine. You have to do
Right.
them. And then he's like, then you raise it up and you have degree of difficulty. And he's like, but to get a perfect 10, you need what he called virtuosity, and which is kind of like an original, like the Thomas Flair. It
Yes.
wasn't just like the floor exercise, it was the flair and the way he put his legs up in the air and twirled around. And that's when you get a
Yep.
10. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I've always been fascinating. And so at the end of his speech, he says Bart Connor was his, or Mitch
Mm.
Gaylord was his training partner. And he said
Okay.
for years, 10 years, a decade, they were training and training and training. And he might have been on the 80 team that didn't go. And then they went in
Mm.
84, I think. And so they had like 8 years of training. And again, I might get my facts wrong, but they're every day in practice. They're like exhausted. First couple hours, they're like, we're going to the
Right.
Olympics, we're going to the Olympics. And then, like, after 6 hours, you're just like, we're going to the Olympics. You're running out of gas.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, they would always do a mock competition. And in the last event of the day, whatever it was, I think it was for Peter, it was like pommel horse. And for Mitch, it was rings. And his coach would be like the head official, where you have to wait
Right.
until the head official says you can go, and then they'd make a
Yep.
noise like boop, and then you would start your routine. And
Yep.
then they would make believe they were tied with the Chinese and that their routine, everything was on the line. And his message was compete like it's practice and practice like it's competition, which I thought was just it was a great message. And he said, lo and
Absolutely.
behold, there we were in 1984, tied with the
Mm.
Chinese.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's a huge
then they
mental
won.
sport for sure. Yeah. I had what we called mentals, where after every practice, you would lay down and kind of get into like, a shavasana yoga, and you would do mental routines. And there was a whole process of where, like, for example, on the balance beam, people fall obviously often. And so if you'd start your routine in your head, imagining it, envisioning it the way that you would perform it in your competition. And if you fell, then the objective was you had to start over. So don't finish that routine, start over until you get your mental state to where you've basically performed a perfect routine in your head. And so, a lot of that visioning work and mental component helped, you be more composed when you were in the competitions and thinking about, okay, I've done this, play it back in your head, and hopefully, it all works out. But yeah, I think that mental toughness and the mental awareness of, visualizing and, practicing, whatever you're trying to prepare for is absolutely one of the biggest components of gymnastics. It's very much a mental sport. Once you get past obviously the physical training, but a lot of people have the physical ability, but you can definitely get in your head, and that could really derail, your ability to be successful. So yeah, I'll have to listen to it.
No
That's
doubt.
good.
I love hearing him speak. And he talks about Trent Demas and how, I don't know
Hmm.
if you remember this, but Trent had to wait like 3 minutes by the high bar before the
Hmm.
head judge said, you can go. And then he did a
Right.
perfect 10 on the high bar. I don't know
Hmm.
if you remember that
Yeah.
routine. It was insane.
It's
But
insane, and yeah, that 3 minutes, you can think about a lot of things
that's
and
an
get in your head the
eternity.
wrong way, and yeah, so, but,
Like you can imagine
wow.
his mind screaming at him, why are they making me wait so long? They're cheating.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
doing that. Who knows what your brain is saying?
right, right, yeah, so,
Great training for all of life, like you said.
absolutely. No, I do, I think, there's always a natural part of just who you are that, I've always, been a determined, independent, I'm an Aries, so we tend to have our, you know, good qualities and our, impatience and procrastination, weaknesses. But I think a lot of it is, you know, who I am. But a big part of carrying that forward was my experience, as a gymnast, and, having that, really be the basis and the background for just how to handle any situation, not just sports. So I owe a lot to that for sure.
Amen. So what's your degree in?
Real estate and construction management. So I've got a business degree, BSBA, and it's a dual major, not a double major. You had a combined program of real estate and construction management because so when my father moved here from Mexico, he actually, within a few years after he, had his job as a cook, ended up going into the electrical apprenticeship program here in Colorado. And so he became an electrician and ultimately was able to open his own business in the 80s. So we, growing up, I was about, I don't know, 12, 13 when he started the business. So I started out, at a young age working for the business. My mom was a part of the business. And, so I'd help answer phones and, do miscellaneous filing and faxing when we had that back in the day. And so I really, both me and my brother, so I have four siblings and then one half brother. I'm the oldest, and me and my older brother, were very involved in the business with my parents. And ultimately, when we decided to go to school, my thought was I'm going to, be part of the family business. So that's what, kind of emphasized me going into construction. And, definitely wanted a business degree. So I was torn between that and going to law school. My other thought was maybe one day I'd be a lawyer. My family says I'm a good arguer, litigator. So I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I'll take it as a compliment. And
Mm.
but I honestly I was like at a point where I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to more school. So after my undergrad, I went and started working for my family business. And then ultimately, my brother and I did a spinoff and started our own business in 2002, a similar commercial electrical contracting. But my dad was kind of getting tired of the labor side of things in his business and wanted to take the business a little different direction. And so he helped my brother and I do a spinoff. And so we started our own business in 2002, him and I. And it's still rocking and rolling. We had some rough little patches, which is what ended up, diverting me to Hensel Phelps, which, was a blessing in disguise. But my brother's still continuing with the business, and I obviously remained in the construction industry just through my network and the contacts that I've had. Was fortunate enough to get an opportunity at Hensel Phelps. So
That's pretty neat. Like, not, I don't know a ton of people that go to school for construction management
mhm.
and then end up doing essentially what they went to school for. I mean, it's happening more today, but I feel like a lot of people
Yeah,
go to school for stuff and then they do something else. But it sounds to me like
exactly.
you're, by practical experience and education, unique,
Mhm.
really well suited to do what you're doing.
Yeah, no, it was again, intentional, and then you end up, I mean, construction is one of those things where you either love it or it's kind of like a love hate. It's it's hard work. There's, a lot to it, but it's very rewarding in the sense of, just the industry itself, building things and knowing that you were a part of it, very much, from a, the craft labor, self-performing, concrete, electrical, just seeing that work go in place. It's pretty cool to like walk by something after it's completed and say, wow, I was part of that, and seeing it all come together. So you either love it and you kind of get in some ways addicted to it, or you realize, it's not for you. But it's been a good industry for myself. My husband did the same degree. That's where we met. We met at the University of Denver. And so he's also in construction. He's a construction executive for another general contractor here in Colorado, Millender White. And he's more on the operations side. I'm more on the front end sales side. So kind of, different roles within the industry, but yeah, we both ended up with that degree and met at DU, and which was, oh my gosh, I'm going to date myself now, 34 years ago.
You didn't have to
Yikes.
disclose that.
That's all right. No shame, own it, right? You got to own it.
Yeah. So you guys met in the program in college?
We did. We met in the program, and also we were both athletes. So he was a hockey player at DU, and so kind of through the athletic network, as well as the college major, but probably more so through the athletic side of things. Athletes tend to have their own group of friends and kind of stick together. I guess it's its own form of a fraternity or sorority. So we met pretty early on, actually, right when I got to school. I was 18, and he's a few years older than me. He went and played junior hockey. So hockey, for those that are familiar, a lot of times they'll graduate from high school, but they're still kind of trying to develop their skill set. And so they'll go to a juniors program. And so he actually played in Omaha for the Omaha Lancers for a couple of years out of high school, and then went to DU. And as a result, was able to also get a full ride scholarship to DU. So he was 1 year ahead of me in school, but is a couple years older than me, just having done that 2 year kind of hiatus for junior college. But yeah, we met right within the first week of school, and the rest is history. So
Wow. He must be pretty smooth.
he is pretty smooth. He is. And we're opposites. He's definitely much calmer and kind of your steady Eddie, where I'm a little more of the Latina flair in me. So it's a good balance. He calms me down, and I rev him up when we need to. But yeah, it's worked. We've been married for 27 and a half years now. So
Nice. Congratulations.
thank you.
Tell me about your children.
Oh, the kids, right? They're the blessing for sure. So I am a mother of three. My daughter Katie was born in 2001. And then I have two boys, Logan and Ryan. Logan is 21 and Ryan is 20. And unfortunately, my daughter Katie passed away in May of 2022 from Ewing sarcoma, a very aggressive bone cancer that she was diagnosed with when she was 17 years old. So she would have been 24 this year. And that's been a journey that you never expect, right, as a parent. And you kind of think, this isn't your story, right? It wasn't supposed to be yours. I still find myself thinking, what happened? Like, how did this end up being, our reality? And but man, she was my hero and still is to this day. I, every day wake up, to honor her and her legacy, and be there for my boys and my husband. But she battled for 4 years, and it's one of those, stories where, as a parent, it's your worst nightmare, where you think, I mean, she was healthy, active in sports. She started at a young age: soccer, swimming, gymnastics, volleyball, and then ultimately decided that volleyball was her sport, kind of in late middle school, early high school. And so her junior year, she started having some leg pain and what we thought was knee pain. And, you go to a sports medicine doctor that, does an x-ray and looks at what it could be. And at the time, they thought, well, this is probably a really bad case of tendonitis. And so let's get you through the season. She had about a month left. This was April of 2018. And so she finished out the season, and then, thought, okay, I'm going to let it rest. And it progressively got worse over the next couple of months. Her pain just continued to accelerate. And ultimately, even, in April, the x-ray that she had gotten didn't show anything significant. And so we kind of carried on and thought, we'll do some physical therapy. We'll, get her some rest. And in, end of July, her pain just got to be too overwhelming. And so we had to go back into the emergency room. We happened to be actually in Minnesota, where my husband's family's from. We were there for his father's 90th birthday party, and her pain just was so excruciating that we headed to an emergency room. And they conducted some tests and found a 6-inch tumor in her femur that was causing the pain. So, again, you think, okay, fine, it's a tumor, doesn't mean anything. It's probably benign. People have benign tumors all the time. And so we, came back to Colorado. Thankfully, I had a really good friend that was an orthopedic surgeon and a sports medicine doctor. He's the one that had been kind of helping. And we had actually had an MRI scheduled for her the following week getting back from Minnesota. So we knew that it wasn't getting better. And so he was on top of it, trying to get ahead of it. But the pain just got so bad that we, had to take some steps while we were on vacation, and got back to Colorado. And within 2 days, they had done all the various tests. And August 1st of 2018, she was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma. So it's a very rare pediatric bone cancer that about 1,000 cases in the US a year. So it's not very common. The good news of it is at the onset, they say there's about a 70% chance of survival beyond 5 years. So we felt pretty good with those odds. And so she started a very, very aggressive treatment her senior year of high school. It was about 9 months of chemotherapy. She had a major surgery to remove the tumor and put a metal rod in her femur and replaced her knee. And she did go into remission in the May of 2019. Graduated high school. She was able to manage all that and still graduate, and had a great summer. Went off to Gonzaga University, where she had gotten a scholarship, a merit educational scholarship, and was on to the rest of her life. And in probably February, March, literally right before COVID, she relapsed. So she spent another year all through COVID battling again with another, treatment protocol of chemo, a stem cell transplant, and went into remission again in 2021, and was able to go back to Gonzaga for a semester. But unfortunately, at that point, it's so persistent. They said the odds, once you relapse once from going to 70% cure rate, it basically goes down to 10% upon a relapse. So she was fighting 3 years with a 10% chance of survival. And quite honestly, her doctors, her oncologists were surprised at, just the 4 years that she was able to battle and live. But man, she just wanted to live. That was what she just was going to do anything and everything. But unfortunately, in January of 2022, we went to Seattle to do a very, early stage clinical trial that was kind of a last effort to see what, it could do. And unfortunately, it didn't do enough. And so she passed away in May of 22. So we are, a family of 4 here on Earth, but she's still very much part of our everyday lives. And luckily, she was so bright and giving and wanting to do things for other people that she started a foundation before she passed that grants bucket list dreams to young adults ages 18 to 26. It's Project Soulflower, soul for sun in Spanish, as a nod to our Hispanic heritage. And we are carrying on that foundation as her legacy to this day and continuing to grow it. So she gave us a gift of some way to do something for others, but also to keep her legacy and her memory alive. So she was something else, a beautiful soul and quite the fighter. So it's been a journey for sure. But my boys are doing good. They're in college together up at Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction. Both are going for business degrees. They are best friends, and thank God they have each other. And we just wake up every day and try to face the moments and find the goodness that still is there. We still feel very blessed. I always say things can always be worse, even though we've been dealt a pretty shit hand, excuse the 4-letter word, but also, we have a ton of family and friends, and the support has been surreal on so many levels. We have great employers, great family, both, very successful careers. And so sometimes you have to focus on those things, because if you spend too much time dwelling in what could have been, it's paralyzing. So we choose life just no different than she did while she could.
Mm.
But I miss her every day, my girl. The shopping and the nails and all the fun girl stuff. I do get my boys to go with me for pedicures, though. They're good sports about that. So, but
Mm.
yeah, she was an amazing soul.
I go for pedicures too.
Good. I'm trying to get my husband there. He says he wants to, but when I say I'm going, he finds a different reason to do something else. So, got to
I
get him
love
there
it.
once. That he'll never regret it.
I almost never go with my wife. It's almost always me, and I'm a girl dad. I have 2
Yeah.
daughters, as I think you may know. But we love doing it. It's like a great time to spend an hour, and it's not even like we're talking or anything. We're just together. It's fun.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I like to get my calves massaged. And I
Uh-huh.
had this one lady, and she was a Michigan State graduate. She's a Chinese woman, and she runs this business. And but she's really strong. Like, she could play for the
Oh, yeah.
Giants. She's like
Right.
and
She
she just
really gets in
rips my
there, digs
calves.
in.
But
Yeah.
now she's managing a different one that's like 15 miles away, and I don't want to drive all that way. So I have this kind of wimpy
Yeah.
woman that does it, and it's just not the same. But I'm too
I
lazy to
know.
drive 15 miles, unfortunately.
I get it.
The other
Well,
one's
you
like
do a
2
lot of
miles
driving in
away.
general,
Oh,
so
you have a
I
good
don't blame you.
memory.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful story. And like, just the fact that you know, have you ever read the Stanford University 100th commencement address by John Gardner?
No, but I'll add
I've
it to
never
my
seen
list.
a video of it, but I carry it with me, and I have it like notations all over it and highlight.
Okay.
It's really great. But he talks about the Stanfords, Leland Stanford and his wife, and these really wealthy people, and they had one son, and their one son died. And then so
Yeah.
they fashioned out of their grief, they built Stanford University as a memorial to their child.
Okay.
And it's just a really beautiful speech, and a lot about human nature. And he talks early on about how some people are vibrant for their entire lives in old age, and how other people mysteriously go to seed, is the way he
Mhm.
puts it, like
I'll
in their
definitely have to
40s or
listen to it.
something. I've never heard it. I've only read it. So if you Google it, I'll send it to you. But
Yeah, send it to me, because I'm definitely, and it's interesting. I'll just say on that note, just to add a little context to why she started the foundation. I don't know, Make-A-Wish, which is a fabulous organization, and Katie was fortunate to be a recipient of a Make-A-Wish. They actually grant dreams up to 18-year-olds. So at 18, they stop granting wishes. And so she, through her treatment, because she was 17 when she was diagnosed, we had a fabulous child life specialist, Christy Grossball, who is now one of my best friends. So again, you meet people along the way that, you wouldn't have met if not for this terrible tragedy. And so, focusing on the gifts and things that came to you as a result. And, she's definitely one of them, but she was very
who is
involved
she?
in, say that again.
Who is she? How did she end up in your life?
Yeah, it's Christy. So Christy, and Grossball, Grosboll. And she is a certified child life specialist, which a lot of people don't necessarily know. And I'll be honest, until we got into this situation, I wasn't as familiar with this profession, but they are basically there to support kind of the emotional life well-being of children, young adults that are battling illness or going through surgery or different things. But they're not social workers. They're more of, I mean, it's a master's degree and program of really trying to support kids through whatever medical situation they're in. And quite frankly, even with Katie, to the point of, she was the one that helped Katie make some decisions on end of life, her final wishes. So, everything from, I'm scared to go into this surgery and I'll be here to support you, or I'm going through a terrible journey. Christy happened to be a child life specialist specific to oncology. So obviously her expertise was focused on kids that were diagnosed and battling cancer. And so a lot of, her job was also to look for, different ways to connect her with other nonprofit foundations that, provided experiences or gifts or things, again, like kind of to keep you positive, forward thinking, helping you to, get through your tough days. But also, there in some of the more difficult conversations about, when things weren't going well, preparing yourself for what that might look like and the things that you need to do for family and friends and yourself. And so, Christy really was that support for Katie along the way. And so early on, they, started talking about, different foundations, because Katie was very much about giving back. And she was also about bucket lists. So she always did bucket lists since she was younger. And she was like, at first thinking, oh, let's, when I'm cured and I'm healthy, like I want to go around to hospitals and help kids make bucket lists so that they have things to look forward to when they get done with treatment. And so it kind of started from that perspective. And then as time evolved, she started thinking bigger and broader. And one day she had a friend, Kylie Schwartz, that, is also one of our angels that passed away in 2019. Her and Katie did treatment in the same time at the same hospital. And so they got to know each other. And at one point, Katie had asked Christy, she said, what did Kylie do for her Make-A-Wish? And Christy said, well, honey, Kylie didn't get one because she was 22 when she was diagnosed with cancer. And so she aged out. And that was the first that Katie realized that Make-A-Wish stopped at 18. And so she was, obviously, that's not fair and that's not right. And we got to do something because, really a lot of the patients that were in treatment with Katie were young adults. I mean, pediatric cancer doesn't stop at 18. It continues on through your young adult. And there's not a lot of services for that age group because I think people are like, oh, they're adults. But she was still being treated at a children's hospital. She was still being treated by pediatric oncologists and physicians because it's a pediatric cancer. They're obviously the experts in that type of treatment. So because of Kylie not getting a Make-A-Wish, Katie's idea to create Project Soulflower as a dream granting organization. So the idea is you make a bucket list, and then we look at that bucket list and help you pick something that you want to do off of that bucket list. And we serve 18 to 26-year-olds that no longer qualify for Make-A-Wish and try to fulfill, different bucket list experiences for them. So that is how it evolved. Kylie's favorite flower was sunflower. So the name Project Soulflower is a nod to Kylie. And like I mentioned earlier, our Hispanic heritage with changing sun to soul for sun in Spanish. And we've probably granted over a couple hundred dreams, some large, some small. And we've only been in existence now for about 3.5 years. So from a brand new foundation and nonprofit, we are really pushing forward and doing some amazing things. And Christy, as a co-founder with Katie, is now our executive director and is running the association along with a very amazing board that is continuing to push the legacy forward and figuring out ways that we can grant bucket list dreams to young adults. So everything from skydiving, trips to Hawaii, And, the cool thing that Katie always did is that her bucket lists weren't always huge things. I think people get caught up in like, oh, I don't know what I would want on my bucket list. Like, I can't afford this, I can't do that. And she was all about small things. And some of them were, I'm going to do a post transplant bucket list when I get out of the hospital. And, as simple as I want to have, some amazing sushi because she couldn't have sushi when she was in for, a major treatment, or I want to watch the sunset. And so they were timeless things, or things that were happening for her in the moment that weren't necessarily, traveling to, South America, although she had some of those things. And, her bucket list when she was in middle school was, one of them was to go to Brazil. And that's what she elected to do for a Make-A-Wish. We went to Rio de Janeiro as a family. And, but some of it was as simple as, going to an Avalanche game. We're all a big hockey fan since, we have a hockey family. Like I said, eating sushi, watching the sunrise, having a picnic in the park. And so just encouraging people to think, not necessarily about, these massive bucket list experiences that have to be, you know, big efforts or money, but just something that might give you some positivity, and that would make you more future focused to just get through whatever journey or challenge you're going on. So yeah, so she taught us all a lot. And she was a wise soul for sure.
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you for
obviously,
letting
you've
me
told me
share.
before. Of course. It's huge. And I think anyone listening, whether they've been through something like that or not, can benefit just from hearing what you're saying.
Definitely.
I like the part about the little things. Like in my life, I try to, like I have this expression. You don't
Mm-hmm.
really know me well, so you probably haven't heard me say it, but I take vacation an hour at a time. If I can, if I'm driving on the weekends or whatever, I might shut off my phone and just drive in a way that I never went before. There's this photographer, DeWitt Jones, and he is or was a photographer for National Geographic, and he's very talented. And he just talks about how there's beauty everywhere. He's like, there's beauty right in your own backyard. There's beauty in a city. There's beauty in a town. There's beauty in nature. And what he does is he takes these scenes where when he first got there, what he was seeing, and he takes some crappy photos that he's like, I was in a bad mood. I was miserable. But then it's
Right.
almost like a Buddhist conversation. He said, essentially, I don't see the world as it is. I see the world as I am. So if I'm negative and if I'm have a gloomy outlook, that's what my camera sees. If, on the other hand, I'm looking for what's right with the world, which is the way he says it. He has a very nice way of
I love that.
communicating. And then he shows these amazing pictures, photographs that he's taken. And he'll show the same scene 5 minutes later, and he'll be narrating. He'll say, this is 6 a.m. on such and such a river in northern Scotland where I was
Mm-hmm.
photographing fishermen. And then, he'll show some like Coke bottles on the ground and candy wrappers. And, he's like in a bad mood. Like, I'm seeing this
Right.
crap on the ground and everything looks like crap. And then all of a sudden the sun just peeks over the mountain and it's orange and it's illuminating the river. And there's a fisherman in the river in a canoe. All you can see is the silhouette because the bright light behind the fisherman, the light, it's not so bright that he can't take a photograph of it, but all you can see
Right.
is the black silhouette of the fisherman. And then he has a word. He's like, I don't know what the word is, magnificence or whatever he narrates. He's a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
narrator. He's almost poetic. And I feel like for me, like if I can get joy out of the little things, like I'm a little disillusioned, for example, with pro sports. Like it's not a middle class experience anymore. Like if you're going to go to a pro hockey game or a pro baseball game, it's going to cost you $500, between the
Right.
tickets and the parking and the
Right.
food and this and that. And to me, that's not
Mm-hmm.
a middle class experience. It's kind of taking the fun out of it for me. And Nothing
Right.
against pro sports athletes or owners or anything. I just don't want any part of it. I don't want to
Mhm.
feel bad about spending all that money and, you know, the extortion that happens when they build a stadium in my city or town or state against my wishes by taxing me so they can build it. So
Yes,
I want to go
yes,
on a country road and see like a beautiful field or turkeys or what in my own yard, just sit on my patio.
right.
So I can really relate to what you're saying. And I really relate to what Katie was saying about the little
And it
things. Like
yeah.
we're about as happy as we decide to be in the moment.
Mhm. Absolutely, and I think that's where, I've had a lot of people say, "How do you do it? How do you keep pushing forward?" And, my, like, worst day at this point has been nothing in comparison to what my daughter experienced, and, yeah, you can choose to sit and focus on those things, and some days you need to, right? Some days are not great days, and, you have to be where you are and process, the loss and the grief, and, it comes in waves and it never goes away. But it has taught me to focus on the small things, the beautiful things, the gifts. I see, there were instances when we were, going through treatment with Katie, and you saw families who, lost their jobs or, were alone, didn't have, family to come and sit with their child so that the mom could take a break. Um, and that wasn't our experience. And so you can find, a blessing in everything, right? And yes, was it really, really shitty that Katie got sick and that she had to go through this and that we didn't want that and that we couldn't imagine that this was our story? But I looked at a lot of families in that situation and I thought, you know what? But we're still very, very lucky. And we still have a lot to be thankful for. And again, it's a choice. It's a way of looking at life and a way of having perspective that, is a choice. And you wake up every morning and you have a choice of how you live that day and what you do to move forward. And so, I thought about, days when Katie was miserable and it's like, did she want to get up and, go to chemo for 10 hours and feel like crap afterwards? No. But she wanted to live so badly and, still found ways to lighten the mood. She used to, I'm a little bit more of a, rule breaker, or, there's a little gray in the world. I'm not necessarily black and white. And she was very rigid. So we would be, kind of running a little late. And I'm like, we're stopping at Starbucks to get coffee. And, in the beginning, she just was beside herself. Like, we're going to be late. I can't believe we're going to stop. And I'm like, honey, it's not like they're not going to give you the chemo. So let's just go and we're going to get our nice cup of coffee. And yep, we're going to stroll in 10 minutes late holding our coffee. And it might be annoying, but at the end of the day, you're going to be there for 10 hours. So let's at least have something that we can enjoy. And so it became a joke of, if we were a little late, it's not like they weren't going to give her the chemo. So I was like, we've got a little bit of wiggle room, right? This is where you can live in the gray a little bit and not totally, disrespect the situation. But
That
yeah,
might be in
just
the category of it's mild irreverence.
yes, yes,
it's
yeah,
it's a peccadillo. It's not a
uh huh,
mortal sin.
right, right, exactly. So, um,
um, so I just wanted to talk to you about, from what I understand, you're very good at what you do, and like you make it sound sometimes like you're the feisty Mexican lady that's going to get her way. But my understanding is that you're very collaborative. Can you tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind, like what makes you good? Why do people talk about you the way?
oh boy, that's a tough one. I think that, I've always had, a lot of confidence. I will say, and again, I think some of that is back to gymnastics. I think some of that is my parents. I had, wonderful parents. My dad has since passed away. He actually passed away the year before Katie of kidney cancer. And so that was another, difficult step in the journey. But, he was truly the American dream. And so I got a lot of my discipline and, kind of, I don't know, gusto maybe from him. And then, my mom is just this compassionate, hardworking, family oriented person that, just so I think I have a good balance of the soft side as well as the confidence and determination that, kind of pushes me and kind of, gives me a little bit of edge. So I think what I would say is I'm not all one thing, I can find a good balance of when to be aggressive, when to push, when to, maybe, push back or fight a little harder, but also I find that I'm also well balanced in, finding grace or listening, depending on my team, celebrating my team, giving credit where credit is due. I don't, I think, in some ways we all have an ego, but I think I've learned over the years, like I'm only as good as, the team and the people that surround me, right? If I'm not doing anything by myself. And so I think the collaboration just comes from acknowledging, yeah, I'm good at these things and I know, and I'm in the profession and I've been in the industry for a long time. I'm well connected. I'm not afraid to meet new people. I'm not afraid to have conversations, as you know, from when we met, at the ABC gala. But it's not something that I can do alone. And, having, always leaning on the expertise that is around you, not only does it make you better, but it also makes you humble. As I get older, all the technology, we were joking about that early on. It's, it gets harder, things are different. I mean, I grew up without a cell phone, like being a Gen Xer that, had technology evolve the way we evolved. It's like I look at my younger team members and I'm so impressed, right, with just, the skills that they bring and the things that they can do that I'm like, I can learn new things, but do I need to? If, you've got these people that are experts. And so I think, again, having the balance of, being confident, pushing, working hard, showing up, leading by example, but also being humble and gracious and looking around you at the people that either make you better or make your team better, I think is a big, part of it. And I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but I always try to find balance in everything I do.
But I feel like it's not only with your team. I feel like it's with the owners. And I mean, I feel like you have a collaborative mindset in all of it. But I didn't want
Absolutely.
to say that. I wanted you to say that.
Yeah, no, it absolutely. And I think with what we do, and especially, in the sales world and the business development world, especially for a large general contractor, I mean, like you said, there are several out there that do it very well. We are not alone when it comes to, building big buildings or airports or, things that are impressive across the country. And so, what is those things that differentiate us? How can we, have a different angle? How can we build a relationship of trust? I think Hensel Phelps is very much, we say, what we do. We don't, we're not a say one thing and do something different. We're very much about our word and transparency and, really being honest. And sometimes that works against us, right? Some of our competitors are a little more, kind of fly under the radar of saying one thing and doing the opposite if they're successful. And, that's not our culture. And, sometimes that doesn't play well for us,
I
owners
mean,
that, they want what they, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And so we tend to really come from a place of honesty and this is what it is and this is what it's going to take. And if you believe us and you trust us, you'll choose us. And if you don't, that's okay.
so I heard a great line. Like I have like a little soliloquy I want to say about your firm. Just my experience. But years ago, when it comes to this, people underpricing you and maybe
Yes.
a little bit looser with the truth. Um, but there was this attorney that wanted to be of service to this business owner, and I was present during the conversation. And the
Hmm.
business owners from like New York City and the attorneys from a little bit upstate New York. And the New York City guy says, you have a great reputation. I think I want to use you, but, can I get a lower price? And the price was going to be like 20 grand to do this work. And the attorney said, yeah, you can get a lower price. And he's like, well, how much lower? And he said, I don't know. And the New York City guy said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, what I mean is you can get a lower price, but not from me.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
You can
Yep.
get a lower
Go
price from
find it.
someone else, but then you don't get
Yeah.
me. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
decide if you want me. And the guy from New York City
Mm-hmm.
said, well, I do want you, but I'm from New York City. I had to at least ask. So it was like
That's
the old
awesome.
school Italian, I got to try to get
Mhm.
a better deal. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was funny. But
That is fun.
I don't know when it started. I think I joined AGC and AGC in 1991. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know when I took notice of your company. I don't know if it was the mid 90s or the late 90s, but I usually go to AGC annual meeting and I almost always go to the New York State stuff. And I'm a member of 12 different states, I think, AGC
Mm-hmm.
chapters. And what I see with your company is this dedication to process and this
Yes.
commitment to safety. And I would say respect for your fellow human beings. Like there's this egalitarian, clearly there's a hierarchy. I've met your senior
Sure.
management, but I feel like there's this, it permeates your culture and that you'll work millions of hours without an injury. And if there is an injury, it's a big deal. We're going to make a big
Yes.
deal about this. We're going to figure out why it happened, how it happened, and we're going to endeavor not to have it happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what you're known for. And it's not an accident. Year in and year out, you're up on that stage when, you know what I mean? Like some
Yes.
insurance carrier or broker or whatever will sponsor like the safety awards. And you guys are
Mm-hmm.
up there every single year. I don't know if you're number one or not, but you're just always up there. And
We
then
are.
you're always up there for a project. You have some project that was a project of the year in the middle market, or it's not always like the biggest project or anything like that. So what I hear and what I see is that you have the respect of your peers, you have the respect of your people, and you have the respect of the owners, the people you serve, which is really it's hard to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that there aren't other firms that don't do it. Um, it's just very hard to do. And my compassion goes to anyone running a business. It's just super hard to do. And it's hard for you guys to be disciplined too and stick to all those things because they cost you money sometimes. Like sometimes the guy fast and loose with the truth is going to get the work. And it sucks because,
Yeah.
probably
Right.
that was our job. You
Yes.
felt like we gave them the ideas and then they took our ideas and they gave it to someone else.
Right.
It
Right.
feels wrong. And
I
then
know.
it's obviously it takes to be deliberate when it comes to things like safety and process. It costs money. But like the best design, I like to say, like in my work, I always talk about design. I'm like, if we get the design right, then the execution is way easier and the odds of
Absolutely.
failure are so much smaller. We have a
Yes.
99% chance of success if we get the design right. Then we can
Mm-hmm.
execute and we keep referring back to the good design. And there's a lot less chance for misunderstandings down the road and stuff like that. So I feel like they're almost universal truths. And I feel like you and your firm practice them religiously. This is not meant to be a commercial for your firm. I just feel like you guys stand out uh, in a way
No, it's
that's not typical.
right. No, I would agree with you. I think those are absolutely the things you mentioned, our strengths. We are employee owned. So I think a big piece of it is we all have skin in the game, right? So that is
Mm-hmm.
also a big piece of,
I
if you
forgot about
don't,
that.
yeah, if you don't perform, you're letting your, co-owner or your co-teammate
Mm-hmm.
down. And so that employee ownership, and then just there's no um, concerns with investing in our people, right? Whether that's training, process, delivery. I think all of that is true. And, it's funny
And
because I
also
told
like
you
the
earlier,
mental health stuff, right?
yep,
Like
mental
you want to
health,
support them in
supporting
every way.
family, right. I was on the subcontractor side and actually worked for Hensel Phelps as a subcontractor on several projects when I was with, the electrical company that my brother and I started. And when I came to Hensel Phelps, it was a breath of fresh air to realize, like, wow, everything I experienced as a subcontractor is actually true. Like there was, there are moments like, oh, are they just, kind of saying this because, it's the right thing to say, or were we just fortunate and lucky that we experienced it, the way that we did. But truly, being on the other side and seeing, kind of how we operate and how we treat our trade partners and the investment that we make in our people, it was really refreshing to know, like, okay, not only was this a good decision, but it is everything I experienced when I worked for Hensel Phelps as a subcontractor, and now I'm even getting it as an employee. So yeah, it's a great company, and we always have more to learn, and we're continuing to grow, and that growth is evolving and creating change, just like any business. But I think we're well prepared to embrace that change and that growth, knowing that we have such strong foundations within safety, process, and our people.
It's impressive. It was just my good fortune to sit with you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Mine too.
Thank you. So, do you know what the most important punctuation is in the English language?
A question mark.
Not in this case. It's the hyphen. Do you know why? Because it's what's between your date of birth and your date of death. So if you had to sum up your life for your great, great, great grandchildren who will most likely never meet you, what would you want them to know about you?
Well, do we have time for one more quick little story that I haven't even had a chance to tell you?
Sure.
I think the one thing is, you never know. I mean, I talked about my daughter, Katie. I've talked about, my dad being an immigrant. Your journey is ever evolving, right? And when you think, you know, I've gone through something pretty horrible and hard, like this is it, right? Like I'm gonna smooth sailing from here on out, and all is gonna be good. What I think is just this perseverance to keep pushing no matter what cards you're dealt. And in December of last year, I actually was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I know. And so you think, I remember in the moment thinking, there is just no way this can be happening, because I've already had my turn at something horrible or challenging or difficult. And so, for a minute, you're pissed and you're like, really? Like, come on. Like, isn't it time for a little break, a little smooth sailing? And so, thankfully right now I am cancer free. I did have to go through treatment, chemotherapy, had a surgery. I'm continuing some ongoing immunotherapy that I'll do until next May. I've got another surgery coming up in November. And so, I'm still in this journey of, getting through it and hopefully not having a relapse. Thankfully, the type of cancer I was diagnosed with is, has a very high cure rate, but it's not an easy one. And, it's interesting because I think having had the experience of what my daughter went through, I'm like, this is no big deal. Right. And I get it. It is a big deal. And I have friends and family that are like, don't say that. Like, it is a big deal and what you're going through. But I think what I think about is, even on, my worst day, it wasn't anywhere near what my daughter went through. And, for those that don't know a lot about pediatric cancer, because they're young and because they're resilient, I mean, they just blast you. And a lot of the success with pediatric cancer is because they can do that, right? You're younger, you're more resilient, your body is able to respond and rebound quicker. And so her treatment was far harder and worse than, what I've gone through. And thankfully I've handled it well. I've been able to work. I've been able to maintain for the most part, my day-to-day life. And so I think what I realized, and what I think, not necessarily what I want them to remember me for, but I think, you just never know where your journey is going to take you. And you can't assume that just because you went through one hardship that, you've checked the box and it's over. And so every day, as you face new challenges, it comes back to, how are you going to choose to live? How are you going to choose to move forward? And how are you going to choose to enjoy the small things around you, or the blessings and the things that make you smile? And, there has been some part of going through this journey to feel like almost, I'm glad to feel some of this like pain and difficulty to know what my daughter went through at a very small level. I don't know, maybe it's, what do they call that? Suffering through, um, like when as any parent, like I would have gone through it 100 times over versus having my child have to go through it. But to kind of feel some of it is a bit relieving. Like, you know what? I it's good to feel and to understand some of that. So, that's maybe a roundabout way to answer your question. I think I'm still trying to figure out all of that and figuring out what is my legacy, right? And how do I, you know, continue to keep finding that path? And I would say for right now, it is, just perseverance um and just really finding those small things along the way that can make you happy, because it is so easy to be mad, to be miserable, to be angry, to blame other people. I mean, a lot of people come to me and they're like, "Do you get mad when you see other, you know, girls Katie's age, living their life and, her friends that, are moving forward, getting married, getting jobs?" And honestly, I miss her, but that doesn't bother me from the standpoint of being envious or mad or angry. It's, you know, it is what it is. And, thankfully these, friends of hers have continued to support our family and always check in. And it's a blessing to have their friendship that, if I push them away, then, you're left with none of the good. So I don't know. I know I'm maybe rambling a little bit because it's hard to know exactly with kind of maybe where I'm at right now in my headspace and journey. I take it one day at a time, and I wake up knowing every day is a choice to, you know, live and push forward and persevere. And until the day comes that I don't have that feeling, that's what I'm going to keep doing, I guess. I don't, there's, that's my choice. I want to, being happy and enjoying my family that, is still around me, and my husband and strong marriage and my boys. Maybe someday I'll be lucky and have grandkids. We'll see.
I hope
But
so.
I hope so too.
So if we were to make an analogy, you're like a Caterpillar D8, right? A bulldozer. You just keep moving forward.
Mhm. Exactly.
And nothing's
Yes.
going to stop a D8.
That's a good way. And I would say most of my friends and family would describe that, of just, I don't know how you keep pushing. And, and of course there's, empathy to like, really, did you need to, have this card dealt? Did you need to go through it? And I don't know, maybe it was, it's another way to, learn something, or, figure out your resilience and maybe have a story one day for a podcast. I don't
Haha, you're funny.
know. Yeah.
I think the Buddhists had it right. Like I often refer to them, but Shakespeare, you could say, stealing from the Buddhists. Things are neither good nor bad, but that thinking makes it so. This stuff just comes, it just is. Like we get to decide.
Right.
Easy
Right.
for me to say. I'm not the one describing what you're describing, but
But there is power in that,
everyone's.
right? There are only so many things you can control. And so focusing on what you can control or what you can choose or decide, I think at least
This is
helps
hard
let
enough.
go. Yeah.
This is hard enough right here. If I
Right.
can control this, all that changes. Kind of like DeWitt Jones
Mhm.
was saying. He says, if I change this, all that changes.
Right. Right.
And like, I don't see the world the way it is. I see the world the way I am. So if I'm just a miserable prick, which I have been at times, everything is, I'm just, my wife calls it when I'm in a not in a good way, she
Right.
calls it spreading joy. She's like,
Mhm. Yep.
so she has a good I don't know if serene is the right word, but she has a very good understanding of the human condition. And
That's
most
nice
people
to
don't, I find, like I think what you just said is prophetic, It's not like it hasn't been said millions of times before, but if I can control this, then I can be happy. Because I
right.
can't
It's a small.
control you, you can't control me. Like I
Mhm.
can't control anything. What the cat does, what the dog does, what the kid does. I remember I used to try to control the kids, and my wife would say, "At what cost?
Mhm.
At
No,
what cost?"
it's a very big, and
To
I, mentioned earlier I've got, two, you know, 21 and 20, year old boys that are, figuring life out, and they lost their sister, and I think one of the things that people don't realize, there's actually not a lot of support out there for sibling loss, right? You think about the
Mhm.
parent, you think about the spouse, maybe the grandparents, but my boys have been through something that, it's forever going to change their life, to where they're still in the start of their life, right? And their whole high school experience was her fighting and sick, and exposure to that. So their perspective is, they're struggling to find that, and they're, young and immature and still learning. And I hope that I'm giving them, and my husband are giving them, some perspective that allows them to learn someday that, yeah, you can only can control what you can control. With grief, there's a lot of anger, and you can choose to be in that place, and it takes a
Forever.
lot. Yeah, it takes a lot. And when you're still young and you haven't had the life experiences to know better, um, I think it's harder. And so, one of my biggest challenges, and hopefully, wins that are still ahead of me, are, getting my boys to a good place with positivity and a good future. And, they're definitely on their way, but, they're traveling a different journey than most kids their age. And especially my middle one, who, now is the oldest, and he's made comments of like, I was never supposed to be the oldest sibling. I don't have my sister to lean on. And, he's very much about taking care of his younger brother and supporting him. And so, yeah, it's an evolution of thinking, right? That maybe when I was 20 or 21, I may not have had this, same perspective, because you're young, and are still, you know, I guess, inexperienced in what is to come. And the older I get, the more I realize, just finding grace and figuring out, what you can actually do to control the situation, and how you can teach that to, your kids and hopefully your grandkids someday. Um, but yeah,
Most people
it's,
never get it. And I'm
yeah,
not saying I got it. Like I have moments of where I
yeah,
think I got it. But my friends that meditate, you know, they they say, there's this book by Dan Harris called 10% Happier. If you haven't read it, it's really good. I can send it to you.
okay, yeah,
But so I'm going to send you John Gardner's thing, and then I'm going to send you 10% Happier.
yes,
But Dan Harris talks about how meditation makes him 10% happier. It doesn't cure him. He's just,
hmm,
he thinks he's a little happier. And a lot of it
right,
is just self awareness. But one thing that I've kind of adopted, I have all these ways of communicating these things that
hmm,
work for me. But if you think of a sine wave, like
hmm,
you spend very little time on the very top, which would be when you're in nirvana or whatever you want to
right,
call it, when you're in that beautiful state, but it's
hmm,
temporary. Like, because then you're either going down, you're going down the other side. And then when you get to the very bottom, when you're in the doldrums, the worst of the worst of the worst, it's probably going to get better, right? You don't spend a ton of time at the very worst point. So you're
hmm,
either growing or, either waxing or waning on this sine wave of life. And to me, the trick is to be happy when I'm waxing, which involves tremendous difficulty when you're trying to get to that nirvana point. And then knowing that 5% of the time when I can like seemingly do no wrong, it's not going to
hmm,
last.
true. It's
It's
so
gonna
true.
turn to shit, as you said.
Yes, that's
And
quick.
then I'm gonna
Yes,
be waning. And then I'm be like,
hmm,
holy shit, how
and
am I
then
gonna be
build back
waxed? I
up.
gotta get back to waxing again. But then when I'm
Hmm,
waxing, it's like with your business. Like you say, okay, when we have a contraction, We're like, oh my gosh, we got to collect all our receivables. Now we have all this cash, but we
Mhm.
have no work. We're like,
Right.
oh my gosh. So we're going out of our minds and we're estimating, we're bleeding cash because we're putting it all into estimating. And then we have no income because
Mhm.
we don't have any work. And then, of
Right.
course, when you're growing at a high rate, like 15 or 20%, you're like, okay, we got to make sure our bank lines are there. We got to make sure we're good with our bonding. We got to all this other stuff. That's a different problem. But there's always going to be a problem, which for you and me is good job security.
Right. That's true. Very much
There's
so.
always a problem. It doesn't matter if things are
Yeah.
going good or not. There's always a problem. So for me, those kind of metaphors apply to everything. And I think you've made a bunch of them today. Just, using gymnastics and all this other, there's days or weeks in the gym when nothing will go right. And then, of course,
Right.
there's days when you can do no wrong. You do 4 perfect 10s on 4 different events and no one
Right.
saw it, but
Yeah.
God saw it.
Mhm. Yeah,
and,
exactly. Yeah, so true.
And then you're like, no, but
Mhm.
really, I did it. And they're like,
It
yeah, sure you
happened. It
did.
happened, I swear. Oh, it's funny.
So, is there anything that you might like to ask me or say, or did I leave anything out or any commentary?
Gosh, no, that was fun. I enjoyed it actually. It's the first time I've actually been able to do this, and one of the things I'm contemplating, and I have a friend that's already kind of started it, but one of the things on my bucket list that's a bigger thing is to actually write a book. So that's somewhat in process in the early stages. But it's funny when I was talking to my friend who's a copyright editor, Erin, she said, and I enjoy writing, but I enjoy talking more. And so this is, she's probably going to love this. I haven't shared with folks that I was doing this because I, kind of wanted to surprise them after the fact. But there'll be some good content that she'll be glad that she can take from this to help with the writing. She's going to be my ghostwriter. And but I said, I'm like, maybe I'm more of like the podcast TED Talk type. And she's like, just pretend like you're talking to me. It's fine. We can do it however you want. But I've enjoyed this, and I think you know, I would say one thing about grief, and one of the lessons that I've learned about other people when you have to tell them about your story. And I refuse to not acknowledge my daughter. In fact, she actually asked me before she passed away, she said, Mom, when I die, are you going to always say you had 3 kids? And I mean, of course, it broke my heart. And I said, Of course I am. Like, I have 3 kids. And she's like, Okay, good. Because I know that, if I'm not there, like, you don't have to acknowledge me. And I was like, I will always acknowledge you. And so I make it a point. And again, it all depends on how a conversation evolves, right? Sometimes people ask how many kids you have, you answer, and it ends at that. But then it'll continue on. And I will go on to say, well, I have a daughter that would be 24. Unfortunately, she passed away from cancer in 2022. And then I have 2 boys. And it's fascinating to me how many people like feel bad or struggle with that answer, right? And then I feel like I'm then trying to figure out how to console them. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm telling you this because it's my life and I love talking about her. And so you're not making me sad, or by asking the question, you're not bringing up grief that isn't in front of me every single day, every single minute of my life. If anything, by you asking the question, you've given me an opportunity to share about this amazing human in my life that will forever be part of my story. And so I think, reminding people, like, grief is not necessarily a bad thing, or allowing somebody to talk about a lost soul or someone that they cared about isn't making them feel bad or making them remember about the person that they lost. They are thinking about it all day. And so just be okay with it and ask questions. I think in most cases, if people are, sharing that they've lost a loved one, they're okay with talking about it and they're okay with opening up about it. And it's just, I've learned through that process that, not everybody knows what to do in those situations. And so teaching people a little bit more about, grief, our country doesn't do a great job in that, of giving people that space to really understand it. And, I've had people like, well, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to make you think about it. And it's like, really? You think I'm not thinking about it
Mm.
every minute of every day? Nothing that you do is going to make it worse. And if anything, talking about it brings joy. So I don't know. That's been a little lesson I learned after, going through it and seeing a lot of people's reactions when I bring it up or mention it. They just don't quite know, what to say or how to deal with it. But it's okay. It's okay.
As you might imagine, I've interviewed, not in this format, but just with my job, like, I don't know, 35,000 people over the years, something crazy number. And, inevitably you're going to run into people that have experienced loss. And I always ask them, I'm not inhibited at all.
Hmm.
But it's just what I've become accustomed to. Right. And,
Right.
I know people want to talk about their kids, and unfortunately, we who are listening often make it awkward. Like,
Yeah. Right.
by
Yeah.
saying, like, making you console
Like, oh
me.
God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring that up. It's like, no, no, it's okay.
Right.
I'm glad you
Like,
did.
I like to say, what were they like? And then immediately people can tell you what they were like.
Right. Right. And it's going to actually be a gift to that person and
No
they're going to
doubt.
feel better for sure.
Like, I was talking to this really tough guy, he's a businessman once, and he knew that I knew, but we had never really talked about it. And he brought it up. We were having breakfast. It was like, at the fanciest hotel, like the Palace Hotel in New York City.
Right.
And I just said, what was he like? And I think he cried. It was I didn't say anything. And
Yeah.
he just said, he lit up a room.
Amazing. Yeah. And I bet he felt so good to be able to say that, right? It's just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So you've given me like a new idea. It's not like more than one, but it's not like I'm going to do all my podcasts with people that have lost someone, but I think it's a really important societal phenomenon. And I'm really grateful that, I know we talked about it before. I wanted to get permission and everything. But I think feel free you can post this anywhere if you think it would do any good.
Okay.
I know there's lots of websites and chat rooms and, grief counselors and all that kind of thing. But I don't know. I just think there's a lot of things I want to do, but this is
Hmm.
one of them. I really feel like there's a lot of people in general, just in society. I feel like there's a lot of emotional pain, a lot of people hurting, um, not just because they lost someone, but I think there's a lot of people that are lost out there. And a lot of the things that you were saying, like, I think could be helpful to people.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think that's definitely, again, as you learn yourself, what can you do to help others and what can you do to, you know, just, I don't know, get smarter and learn, from whatever we can share from our own experiences. But yeah, I'll never forget when my daughter asked that and I thought, wow. And so anytime it comes up, I
Mm-hmm.
hear her in the back of my mind and I will always acknowledge her, whether it makes the situation uncomfortable or not. Again, you have to kind of practice. I mean, I literally, for a while, I'm like practicing, like, okay, if they ask this, this is how I'm going to respond. If they ask this, because you're literally worried, like, they're going to feel so uncomfortable and awkward. And then I got to like console them. And I'm like, how did this just flip around to, to that? But yeah, I think you said it perfectly. Just to ask a question, like don't feel bad or think that you did something wrong. Instead, be in the moment and ask them about that person because I guarantee you that will be more powerful and it will lift them up in a way that is going to be better than, oh my God, I'm sorry, we don't have to talk about it. It's like, no, what was he like? What do you miss
Yeah.
the most? Anything. So it's perfect.
Well, thank you for your time. And I'm sorry I won't see you next week at the DBIA thing, but
I know.
hopefully I'll
Well,
see
I'll
you
see
another time.
you, I'm guessing, at ABC in February because I'll definitely be at the ABC conference in February, wherever that is. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's in
that
Florida, maybe?
the February, yeah, they always do a February. I think that's their annual kind of kickoff, and then again the LegCon in DC, because that's usually when I have my committee meetings that I have to be there in person. So yeah, I've got quite a bit of some other travel happening, and then as now some medical stuff that's been a bit of a challenge trying to squeeze into the calendar, but I'm feeling good. So onward and upward.
Well, have a great afternoon, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Don't go. If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.